Lots of council chambers are like that.
Good evening, councilors, and senior management, and residents of Pelham. I see that we have quorum, so I announce this meeting of July 15th in session. We will now have the singing of the national anthem, led by our clerk, Ms. Pizarro.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Okay. Approval of, so I need a piece of paper.
So through Mr. Mayor, there is the regular agenda, but I do have notification from members of council for amendments. So if you read this one first and then the amendments.
Okay, so motion put forward by Councillor Trophy, seconded by Councillor Hildebrand. Be it resolved that the agenda for the July 15th, 2019 regular meeting of council be adopted as
And then you do have amendments, so
But-
these are the amendments that are proposed that I
do I
know
call the
of.
vote on that?
Not yet.
No, okay. So we have a motion put forward by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Trophy, that the agenda be amended to move item 11.2.16, which is the memo request for extension of interim control bylaw after item 5.22, delegation by Tim Nora. Item 10 to be considered as the first item of business.
18,
I'm sorry?
item 18.
Oh, item 18, sorry. Any discussion on this? And all those in favor of this motion? Any opposed? Motion carries. There we go.
So now it's the vote on the agenda as amended.
Okay, so now we will vote on the agenda as amended. Motion put forward by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Trophy. Be resolved that the agenda for the July 15th, 2019 regular meeting of council be adopted as amended. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I will ask all council members if you have to declare any pecuniary interest or general nature thereof. Not seeing any, will the clerk please take note.
So noted, Mr. Mayor. So in accordance with the amended agenda, Mr. Mayor, the next item is the closed session. So council will need to reconvene in a separate room.
Okay. So for some to presentations, but before we do that, I do have a couple of town individuals that I would like to just mention. The first is Mike Hurley. He's a Pelham Minor Basketball Association coach. He was honored by the Ontario Basketball Association. He was named Coach of the Year. He is 44 years old, father of 2. He met his wife, where else, on the basketball court. And he has coached two teams this year in the PBMA. And basketball is the glue that holds that family together. There's other individuals I'd like to commend, Pelham residents, 2 or 3 18-year-old gentlemen by the name of Aaron McQuillan, Bailey Campbell, and Billy Tarbett. They spotted a car stopped on Highway 20 in front of Tim Hortons. It had mechanical failure. The woman driver was very distressed. She lived in Welland and couldn't afford a tow truck. So these teenagers pushed her car 9 kilometers to her house in Welland. It took 2 hours for them to do this. Another motorist followed behind with his 4-way flashers on to provide safety. The boys got home at 4:30 in the morning. When it was all over, the woman was very grateful to the boys and was amazed at her gas mileage. Okay, let's get this evening rolling. So we have a presentation, delegations. So Fond Hill Volunteer Fire Association, and I lost the gentleman's name, with being Lieutenant Yvonne Audette making the presentation. Okay, sir, you're on. You're on.
Mr. Mayor, our annual road toll that we have every year, it is a pleasure on behalf of the Pelham Volunteer Fire Association, Fond Hill, to present a check to the town of Pelham for the amount of $2,500.
Oh, wow.
On behalf of the council and the residents of Pelham, we gratefully accept this check. Thank you very much. Thank you. You're welcome. And I just want everyone to see that I'm giving this to the town treasurer.
I was waiting for it.
Should have raced him out there.
Okay. I think I need that.
Your next item is here. They have authorized in writing Mr. Highcoop to speak on their behalf.
Okay, next presentation is a representative, a Mr. Highcoop, to make the presentation for Jennifer Vida and Tom Richardson. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Martin Highcoop with Upper Canada Consultants. I'm here with respect to Saffron Meadows Phase 3, item number 11.2.14 in your agenda. Basically, I wish to say that our client supports the recommendations from staff in the report, and we're asking that council approve the recommendation report. And if there's any questions, I'm here to answer those questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilors, as you have no doubt looked over the agenda in the week that we've had it, did anyone recall having any questions on the item quoted? Saffron Meadows.
Through you, Mr.
Councilor
Mayor,
Hahn?
I do, but I think most of the questions will probably be directed to our Director of Planning. Yeah.
So none to this gentleman then? Oh, thank you for your presentation. Thank you. Okay, and that is the, oh no, so now Tim's on. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry, so the next presenter is Tim Nohara, Chair of the Cannabis Control Committee. Thank you for presenting tonight, Tim. Oh, I should be.
Mr. Mayor, Council, visitors, well, I'm happy to be here on behalf of the Cannabis Control Committee for our first presentation to Council. So this is to give you an update as to what we've been doing. By way of an agenda, I'll speak briefly to the work we've done since our formation and some progress to report on. I'll focus a few minutes on one aspect of that progress, which is a regulatory framework to sort of guide our work. And then the reason we're here tonight in part is there is a resolution before you for an extension of the interim control bylaw to help us complete our work. So I'll speak to that briefly, and then I'll conclude with some consequences if we don't have an extension. So in terms of our committee work since formation, this slide was submitted in accordance with the guidelines, so it's as of July the 2nd. There's been work since that time. Council appointed members to the committee, and don't mind my eyes over there. I don't want to wear these silly cheaters, so I can see that font just fine. Council appointed members to the committee on May the 6th, and we had our first committee meeting on the 29th of May. At that meeting, we elected our chair and vice chair. I'm the chair. Carla behind me is our vice chair, and some of our members are here. We discussed meeting procedures for the committee, and we had a basic introduction to planning from our planning department. We've been meeting weekly just because we're trying to get ahead of this. There's a lot of work to do. So on June the 5th, we had our second meeting, and we had received a planning overview and timeline, so help give the committee a better understanding of the planning process and the timelines that would be needed, which in part inform this request for an extension, as there's timelines involved to do the work. On the 19th, our third meeting, we had a very good bylaw enforcement presentation from the town, and we started developing our regulatory framework on which to guide our work. On the 26th of June, our fourth meeting, our town solicitor, Callum Shedden, was present for us for, I think he stayed 2 hours and change. He was delightful and answered all of our questions regarding potential concerns. This town is certainly familiar with threatened litigation, so it was important to the committee to understand what that could look like in the context of the mandate of the committee. And finally, on July the 2nd, we approved this presentation and filed the material before council, before you tonight. In terms of progress to report on, the resolution that's before you on tonight's agenda was our first piece of work. It's a resolution for council to consider for a one-year extension to the interim control bylaw. And the regulatory framework, the draft regulatory framework, it's a work in progress, and I'm sure there'll be development to it. We have a new CAO with us. Personally welcome again, who has experience specifically in this area, and I have no doubt with the research that we're doing that there will be some developments there. So let's look briefly at this regulatory framework. At the very least, the draft version that's before you will give us maybe a common understanding of the work we have before us as a committee. And across the top column before you, you have a variety of impacts, of negative impacts that we're looking to control, to get a handle on. Those impacts come by virtue of the terms of reference that this council provided us with to guide our committee. So we've organized those impacts across the top, things like odor and light, but there's certainly a lot of concern across all those items: loss of property value, traffic, loss of agricultural lands, environmental and water-related concerns, human safety concerns, and certainly cost is a concern to this committee, and to ensure that this council, this town, benefits from the appropriate financial contributions producers in our town. Down the rows, on the left-hand column, are some the more obvious controls that we have available to us at our fingertips. That is really where our work lies. Our work lies in finding the right set of controls, likely a collection of them, that will help as a group address the impacts and find the right balance between the production facilities and the enjoyment of the members of our community. So on the left column, everything from the interim control bylaw, that's a control that's placed a moratorium essentially until it expires. Our official plan, our zoning bylaws, possible use of nuisance bylaws, site plan control. There was an amendment before this council a few weeks back on that our planning department brought you, and I believe you approved a site plan agreement itself, development charge bylaws, which I know there's a public meeting on last week, I believe, and business licenses bylaw. There's other bylaws. These are just some of the tools in the toolkit, maybe some of the obvious ones. So when we come back and report to you subsequently, what we hope you will see are some check marks in some of those cells there. And what you can think of is if you look down a column, say odor as an example, the first one, then what you hope to see are some check marks down that column, some tools that we're going to bring forth amendments to consideration to council, where this is not only a scorecard, but it's giving you an understanding of how we hope to balance the controls that we're going to recommend and bring forward. If you look across a row, it's telling you how a particular control was used to address potentially a number of impacts simultaneously. So the assistance we need from council is we have a lot of work to do, and it became clear to us reasonably quickly that there's no way we could complete our work properly without an ultimate extension to the interim control bylaw. The committee has been working diligently, weekly, and it's even difficult to review minutes and even prepare minutes before the next meeting because there's so much work and research going on. We need to conduct our research, and we're in the midst. We formed several groups just recently to go out and conduct that research, taking advantage of a great skill set that sits around the table that you put together. And we have to thoughtfully apply that research to those planning tools, those tools in our toolbox, because yes, we want to mitigate against the negative impacts that residents have forcefully and consistently brought to us, but we've also got to be surgical in what we do. Let me give you an example. In theory, we'd have a lot of challenges, but in theory, we could just say ban cannabis. And very simple thing to do, potentially. Maybe not so simple legally, but one simple method, but it would address all the concerns, but it's neither thoughtful, wouldn't have planning justification support, wouldn't even be able to take some of the advantages of what we have now. So we need to be thoughtful. We need to make sure that the greenhouse growers today that we have are not overly negatively impacted, specifically by the controls that are needed for cannabis. The Planning Act offers up to a 1-year extension, and we would be remiss if we didn't ask for the year extension, the full year. I'd note Niagara-on-the-Lake recently asked for and was granted a 1-year extension to their interim control bylaw to deal with cannabis issues. We're into summer already, summer holidays. We are aware of the required consultations that need to happen with any recommendation to any particular control, public meetings, amendments council may wish to make to anything we propose and bring forward to you, and any direction you may wish to give back to the committee. So while it's true that a 1-year extension could be appealed to the local planning appeals tribunal, in effect any bylaw can be appealed. It's a normal process. If we finish early, and we're certainly going to work as hard as we can to finish early, I can certainly tell you that the committee would be behind rescinding the bylaw, the 1-year extension bylaw, at that time once our work is done. So it can come off the table at that time from the committee's perspective. In terms of justification, it's helpful to look back at what brought us here. 15th of October was when the interim control bylaw was put into place not that long ago. Its purpose to give the town time to research and approve policies and regulations to manage and control cannabis-related uses. I'm quoting specifically from the bylaw. October 22nd, we had a municipal election. Everybody here was very busy during that period. And on December the 3rd, we swore in this council. February 4th, we didn't waste any time, this council. February 4th, council passed a resolution to create the committee that I'm speaking on behalf of. And in the time frame from February 4th to our first meeting on the 29th of May, many things were going on by the staff to prepare for the committee. We developed the terms of reference, advertised for volunteers to come forward, reviewed applicants. There were many, and selected and approved those applicants by council. Staff notified the approved members and started preparing so that staff could instruct the committee to carry out its duties. So needless to say, the council and staff have acted quickly and diligently. Without an extension, we just won't have the time to do our work. We won't have the time to do good research, and we won't have time to be thoughtful in that research and thorough, and especially with respect to the official plan and zoning bylaws. And we may miss opportunities to do it much more surgically, so we focus on issues and not get too broad. We may inadvertently cause harm to others. We've already had reports of some concerns by other existing farming operations. And if we don't have the time, if we're rushed, then our amendments are more likely to not meet our objectives. A simple illustration, if we just pass some odor control as one concern, as one impact, and we don't do that right, it can be appealed to the Normal Farm Practices and Protection Board, which has higher jurisdiction on that particular tool, in which case we may spend our time and efforts fruitlessly. And also, if we do our job right, then I think we can never avoid the normal appeal process. I mean, that's life, that's doing business, but at the very least, we can do it thoughtfully and probably mitigate some or all of that. So the Cannabis Control Committee members and the community, if we don't have the time to do our job, and I think it's very clear to the members that we need the time, there is a consequence that the committee members, certainly in the community, will be left with a message that we're really not serious about trying to be thoughtful and get our situation under control. And I believe that if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer any, but thank you for the opportunity to bring you up to date with our work.
Thank you, Mr. O'Hara. Any questions for the chairman? I'll have, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Tim, thanks very much for your presentation, and I agree with everything that you said. I'm in support of the extending the interim control bylaw for another year. However, I'm going to put this either to you or the Director of Planning or our CAO. Would it not be better if we waited, we deferred maybe a couple of months to enact this, because there's a good potential of appeals, and if we're a little bit further on down the road, that appeal takes some time to process, that perhaps if we delay a little bit on the passing of this extension, we could probably get through any legal challenges going forward.
So I think it's a very good question, and it's one that at some level, at least, at one level, we've considered at the committee table. So my understanding is there are sort of two lines of potential appeal. One is the normal one for any zoning bylaw through the LPAT, through the Local Planning and Appeals Tribunal. That is an appeal that, through our solicitor's briefing to us and question and answers to our solicitor, I mentioned at one of our meetings, likely wouldn't happen for at least a year. There wouldn't be a hearing for a year, and our work would certainly be done by then. The bylaw would be expired by then. So with respect to the LPAT appeal, I don't think that's an issue or a reason, my own opinion, I don't believe that's an issue or a reason to defer. We know we need the time and effort to do this job right, and if we know we have the time, then we're going to focus our energy over the next couple of months between now and September. We're going to focus our energy doing the things we should be doing, knowing that we have a bit of runway to get the job done. If we're uncertain as to whether we have the extension coming, then that, you can imagine, would necessarily guide the way that we tackle our work, because there would be risk in that it might not go approved at a later date, and so we'd have to manage that. So that's just specifically on the LPAT question, the normal bylaw appeal process question. And my own personal belief on that is we'd absolutely be successful on that appeal, but it wouldn't matter a year later. We'd be done our work by the time they heard it, and it would be behind us. There's another line of appeal that's possible that I understand, and this is just understanding I've gained in this role, and that's to the courts. LPAT is not to the courts. LPAT's looking at, are you passing resolutions consistent with policy and planning in Ontario? The courts are different. The courts, as I understand it, a layperson, I'm not a lawyer, the potential argument there is one of bad faith. And so that's a legal question. I'm not prepared to sort of comment or answer on that part of it. People can appeal to a court, and their cases can be dismissed or they can be heard. If it was appealed to the court, I don't think there's a timeline that this committee would be too concerned about if it was a court appeal, because the timelines can be very long. My understanding of the interim control bylaw and an extension to the interim control bylaw is that even if there was an appeal to the courts, we would continue to run. In other words, the interim control bylaw would continue to stand, the extension would continue to stand until the court heard and settled the case, and we'd get our work done. So I'm not suggesting in any way, I'm not giving any advice, I don't have any to give on the bad faith argument. Possibly if you were just to defer a decision and pick it back up in a couple of months on a scheduled date, and we press ahead knowing that you're going to, maybe we can have the best of both worlds. That's just my personal remarks.
Thank you. Could I have some staff comment on that, please?
If I may, the simple answer is that staff would strongly encourage council to consider deferring making a decision on the extension of the interim control bylaw until what amounts to effectively the 11th hour. We did canvass dates with the clerk, future meetings where you could make that decision. The interim control bylaw is currently passed is for a period of a year. We have not yet exhausted that period of the year. If you'd like specifics as to why you're receiving that advice, then I'd strongly encourage you to bring a motion to go and close to receive legal advice on that question. If you're happy with the general answer is we haven't used up our entire year, and you have plenty of there's 3 more months in which we could do a fair bit of work, and we'd like to have that opportunity before we consider expanding the interim control bylaw.
Thank you. Councilor Trophy.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Can we set a date this evening then to come back and look at this if we're as to what we want to go? Like, we have a meeting on September the 16th. That's one just before the October 15th deadline. And that way we're not going right to the last meeting.
Mr. CEO.
That Councillor Trophy's suggestion certainly could work. There's no way around that. Council has other options or alternatives, though. When you look at the approach to cannabis, it's a complex issue, and it requires complex solutions and regulation by this community. And really that is just sort of code for saying it's multifaceted. No one solution addresses the underlying problem. Looking at odor doesn't help with light. Looking at light doesn't help with setback. Looking at setback, and so it goes. So council could consider public meeting for some of those pieces that have been identified as simply good solutions, regardless of where we go. The committee's doing good and yeoman's work on a number of sort of technical regulatory approaches, if I may. But there are some pieces that I think have been identified, and some of those require, pursuant to the Planning Act, require public notice and time to let the community know. We'd like to have a meeting on those. So it would be possible to set a public meeting on a number of potential, and here I'm talking about specifically bylaw type reactions, potential new bylaws or amendments to existing bylaws to address the underlying subject matter. So we could do that in the interim, which I think would be, I'd like to submit, might be a profitable use of the time. The entire advisory control committee, beg pardon, could attend and make some submissions there. We could also have input from the public on those, on some of those facets, which I'm not suggesting is an exhaustive answer, but moves the chains down the field, right? So council has a couple of choices here. It can grant the request. It can instruct staff to look at the viability. We have some potential dates for public meetings for some portions that I think we're prepared to suggest are good ideas, regardless of the entirety. And or it could simply pick a date to consider this request between now and personally, I'm not convinced it's October 15th. Like, I can make an argument it's October 14th, but either way, we want a decision prior to that date.
Absolutely.
So a couple of things for council to consider. Further specifics require closed meeting proceedings, but those are general comments.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, so there's two scheduled meetings prior to October 14th or 15th. We have September 16th or October 7th. But I would like to see it move forward tonight, that we don't pass one of those dates and we do extend it ICB if needed, because there is, being on the committee, I know there is a lot of work, and I don't think it can be done in the amount of time that we have now. So I don't want it to get passed. I would like to see at least September 16th. It gives us a meeting prior, just in case something were to go wrong.
Perhaps we'll ask the Madam Clerk about these dates and the preference of.
To respond to the councillor through you, Mr. Mayor, I did have a discussion with the Director of Planning this afternoon with regard to timelines and public meetings that would be required. And we have looked at some dates for public meetings, for example, August 26th, which is a Monday, meaning that a report could be presented to council on the 16th of September, which would certainly be in line with the councillor's timeline. Another option would be to have the public meeting on September 9th, which could then also result in a closed session, or not closed session, a special meeting of council on either September 23rd or September 30th, all prior to the expiration of the interim control bylaw on the 14th of October.
Thank you. Those are options. So do we vote on this now?
Right now, before you, Mr. Mayor, is the presentation from Mr. Nohara as the chair for the committee. It is to be received for information. The next item on the agenda, as you'll recall, was moved up on the agenda, and that is the memo to request the extension from the Director of Planning. Okay. I would suggest that that would be an appropriate time to make any amendments to that recommendation and to perhaps direct staff to convene the appropriate public meetings.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. O'Hara? Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. O'Hara, I'm just wondering, Niagara-on-the-Lake, so how far, their deadline, and how far before their deadline did they, you said they just recently passed?
I wish I knew that answer.
Oh, okay.
So somebody here must, but I don't know that answer.
Okay, just wondering.
I know it was last month, that it's July, yeah, it's last month. It was in June when they passed the 1-year extension, but I'm not certain what their expiry date was.
It's going to be September.
It was September.
So
Yeah, they're just about a month and a half prior to us last year.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So I've got a question, Mr. O'Hara. I've run through the minutes of your last meeting, and there was mention of the Normal Farm Practices Protection Board and how there's 6 communities, 6 municipalities in the region that are affected, and that you were thinking that one or all of you should take a case to the Normal Farmer Practice Protection Board, and I don't know whether you were going to specifically go odor or something, because then if you had a ruling from them, then you could use that legal precedent to set bylaws here. So my question is, have any / all of these municipalities made a motion to take something to this Normal Farm Practices Board?
So, to answer your question, sir, it's two-part. The first part is the meeting you're referring to was a presentation by Craig Genesee, our bylaw enforcement officer, and he wasn't relaying information about committee work. He was relaying information from attendance at a meeting in the region where Health Canada officials were present, along with several bylaw enforcement officers from our different municipalities. And in that context, as I understood it, as I received that information, he was relaying that there was discussion across our counterparts in other municipalities about looking at bringing some action to move the dial on rulings. And that's because there's a lot of discussion about what you can't do. Having said that, just a couple of points as I understand them through advice from our solicitor and through just our own reading. First off, the Normal Farm Practices and Protection Board doesn't set precedents. So they're a board, they do not set legal precedents. Legal precedents have to be through actions that go to the courts, as I understand it. So, or at least as it's been communicated to me. So first off, there are two types. One is sort of the normal process through the statutes, and then the other are the courts. The second point I would make is the Normal Farm Practices Board, as was mentioned here earlier by our CAO, really just would address concerns over here in this chart in, say, odor and light, for example. So in terms of where we would overlap with the Normal Farm Practices Board, the Normal Farm Practices Board overlaps in jurisdiction with municipalities, specifically in the area of 7 nuisances, and the ones of most importance to us certainly is the odor and the light. So if we're talking about bylaws that are in the odor or light columns on our framework, and that's why we've got a much broader framework, then those we would be mindful of, as you're noting. We would want to think about how the Normal Farm Practices and Protections Board might overrule a bylaw with respect to odor or light that this town might bring forward. And that's why, not to say that a nuisance bylaw, which is on this list right here as a tool, not to say that it couldn't have a check mark in that column, but we need to be thoughtful and mindful that that check mark, that tool we bring in, could in fact be appealed to the Normal Farm Practices and Protection Board. So that would be one check mark, and we'd need belt and suspenders, so to speak. There are other areas in that chart that our solicitor advised us in, for example, under the environmental column or the water column, where we might be better served in bringing forth some tools that would not be purview of the Normal Farm Practices and Protection Board. That's why we need to be thoughtful. That's why there is work to do. There are many acts, the Environmental Protection Act, for example, the Health Canada Act, have nothing to do with the Normal Farm Practices and Protection Board.
So not to put too fine a point on it, from what I gathered in the minutes, it appeared to me that the thought at the regional level where this bylaw officer was that if you did take a case to the Normal Farm Practice Protection Board, and if they said that the odor was part of a necessary growing or the growing of the crop, then it would be a waste of any municipality's time to try to limit that.
So first off, is that the June 19th
Yeah.
minutes? So those minutes have not been approved. I think they made it into the agenda package by error. So there is some review needed on that. The other minutes were approved, but those minutes, so your comments are very good, sir, because they'll help us look at those minutes and make sure that they say what we intend to say.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, okay. Thank you for your presentation. And I have here motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that council receive the presentation by Tim Nora, Chair, Cannabis Control Committee, for information. Any discussion on this? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. Oh, now we have the amended. What is this?
So that is the motion presented by the committee through the memo from the Director of Planning.
Okay. So this is, council, what we will be voting on. So, motion put forward by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Whereas interim control bylaw 4046-2018, also known as the ICBL, was approved on October 15th, 2018, and remains in effect until 11:59 p.m. local time on October 15th, 2019, unless otherwise extended in accordance with provisions of the Planning Act, RSO CP 13, as amended. And whereas the purpose of the ICBL is to provide the town with the time to undertake the review of its land use planning policies and regulations pertaining to cannabis-related land uses, and to develop appropriate policies and regulations to manage and control cannabis-related issues before considering any further cannabis production expansion in the town of Pelham. And whereas municipal elections were held in the town of Pelham on October 22nd, 2018, and a new council of the town of Pelham was sworn in on December 1st, 2018. And whereas council of the town of Pelham passed a resolution on February 4th, 2019, for the creation of a Cannabis Control Committee, also known as the CCC, tasked to assist with the development of appropriate land use policies, regulations, and procedures for better managing the impacts of cannabis producers in the town of Pelham. And whereas the first meeting of the CCC took place on May 29th, 2019, following the drafting and approval by council of the CCC's terms of reference, the advertising for and collection of applications for membership on the CCC, the review, selection, and approval of applicants by council, and the preparation by staff for the CCC's first meeting. And whereas, after giving consideration to 1, the research needed to develop appropriate land use policies, regulations, and procedures for better managing the impacts of cannabis producers in the town of Pelham. 2, the timelines required for seeking stakeholder comments, providing notice and holding public meetings, and bringing resolutions, including those concerning amendments to the town's official plan 2014 and its comprehensive zoning bylaw 1136, passed in 1987, to council for deliberation and approval, and 3, the reduced availability of planning department staff and council due to summer vacations and planned fall vacations. The CCC has determined that it is not possible for it, staff, and council to complete their work, to complete their priority work of developing and bringing into effect the desired cannabis controls prior to the current expiry of the ICBL. And whereas the CCC has determined that it is necessary and appropriate for council to amend the ICBL by extending it by 1 year to 11:59 p.m. local time on October 15th, 2020, in order to provide the necessary time to complete the important work for which the ICBL was put in place and the committee was created. Now therefore, the Council of the Corporation of Pelham enacts as follows. Paragraph 5 of interim control bylaw 4046 shall be amended as follows. This bylaw shall come into effect and force immediately upon its passing by council and shall be in effect until 11:59 p.m. local time on October 15th, 2020. Discussion on this. Now, Councilor Stewart.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I have concern about the dates because it says that it was passed on the 15th, but then this is saying it will remain in effect until the end of the day on the 15th. So shouldn't that be on the 14th because that would have been the 365 days?
I think so.
Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, also as noted by the CAO, yes, the 1 year would be the 14th.
The 14th, okay. Okay, so we should change that date. Or is it changed? I don't know. By 1 year local time, 11:59 on October 15th. So, but the councilor is saying that this should be of the
14th.
14th. Is that what you alluded to?
That is what I alluded to.
Yeah. Okay, so you're right. So we do have to, extending it by 1 year to 11:59 p.m. local time on the October 14th.
Actually, by that point, it might be to the 13th.
This is one more year.
The Interpretations Act says you don't count the first day, you do count the last day. Don't want to get into a legal dispute by 24 hours when it's easily avoidable.
Okay,
So let's just not open up that door.
okay. And so make it the 13th. Okay, so we'll go, so it'll be on the 13th, October 13th, 2020. Okay, thank you, Counselor. Any other, yes, Counselor Trophy?
I just want to make it clear to the rest of the councilors here, if this isn't the way that you want to go, there is a lot of work that has to be done here. I would like to make an amendment, if we're not going to go this way, to go no later than the 16th or the 23rd of September. That's all I'm saying. But if we extend it now, great. But if we don't, I'd like to make an amendment instead of throwing it off the table to no later than September 16th or 23rd, the latest.
You want to speak on to that, too?
There are two things for council to consider. Firstly, to be clear and to reiterate, your staff advice as a result of both planning and legal advice is for you to adopt a course of action that would result there's a public meeting that can be held that would still allow you to consider bylaws and this request on September 23rd. Sorry, I forget the day of the public hearing, but the clerk had read that out.
September
Aug-
9th.
There you are. So August 26th allows the September 16th report, or September 9th allows the September 23rd. So 2 in September, that's 2 weeks apart. And effectively, everyone's returned from summer vacation, and that's sort of a 2-week period that allows a lot of focus. The other item for council's consideration is that at the moment, the issue of cannabis control is, it seems to me, the new guy, the dominant and most important and most pressing issue for the town of Pelham currently in its social agenda. However, and with respect, one day this too shall pass. Section 38.7 of the Planning Act says that after the final expiry of your interim control bylaw, you can't pass a new interim control bylaw for 3 years for any purpose on the same lands. Since this bylaw applies to effectively all of the town of Pelham, that means you can't pass an interim control bylaw for 3 years for any purpose, virtually anywhere in the town of Pelham. My employment experience, without giving you legal advice, has been that 2 of my last 3 employers have deeply regretted passing interim control bylaws on a given topic when subsequently a second topic came up and they didn't have that planning tool. So for one of those municipalities, they used an interim control bylaw to regulate student housing, and then they were faced with the issue of methadone clinics and couldn't pass an interim control bylaw on that issue. The other municipality used the an interim control bylaw to regulate the existence or lack thereof of adult entertainment facilities, and then also couldn't use an interim control bylaw when it came to considering, again, methadone clinics. But the issues don't matter. The point is, there could be something else. It could be short-term rentals. I have no idea. But the longer this gets extended, in fact, if you extend it another year, then this council will never again be able to control an interim control bylaw. It'll be only a subsequent council will have that power. So I realize I'm speaking with the abstract, but it's an abstract that's a real thing. And it's always important, of course, to look at the totality of the community which we are serving. Accordingly, I think staff would commend to you that we consider a public meeting to deal with those issues we can deal with in September. That gives you an opportunity to pass bylaws that you deem appropriate after public consultation, after a chance for the community to tell us what they think of the proposed bylaws. But it also lets, at that point in time, you decide exactly how much extension you might want to give, keeping in mind that the longer you give to this item, the longer you have to wait before you can use it on any other item. And I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you what's going to matter in 3 years, but it takes away a tool. And the single strongest tool you have with respect to planning and development items for this community. It's the biggest arrow in your quiver. And the more we extend it, the longer we have to wait before we can use it again. That would be our advice to you.
Thank you. Any other council members to speak on the issue? Also, to Councillor Trophy's amendment, he would need a seconder on that. Yeah. So Councillor, after hearing the CAO, or do you still want to make that amendment?
Yeah, I'd like to go at least to September 23rd.
Okay, no, we, wait.
August 26th, okay, so it was August 26th meeting, then it was September 16th is the report, or September 9th is the meeting, September 23rd report.
Through Mr. Mayor, if there is a staff direction to direct staff to convene the necessary public meetings in order that council can make a decision by September 23rd at the latest, then that gives staff some flexibility in scheduling a public meeting through you, Mr. Mayor, and ensuring that we comply with Planning Act notification requirements in order to bring the information back for council's consideration on or before September 23rd. So that's the direction that gives staff at least some flexibility in terms of the date, notification requirements, and work of the committee.
So just to sum it up then, if we do that, go that route, and we need to extend this, we can come back here September 23rd, no issues, vote on it to extend it, yes or no?
Yeah.
And for whatever duration of time you deem appropriate.
Okay, then I'm okay as long as we're here September 23rd, and we don't have to go through anything else.
Okay, so you're dropping your amendment then, or just like this? Or are you putting your amendment in?
Putting an amendment forward.
He's putting an amendment to direct staff to
Okay.
postpone the consideration of this motion until, and to direct staff to convene the necessary public meetings in order for staff, or for council to make a decision by September 23rd.
Yeah, so September 23rd, the decision will be made.
Okay. Councillor.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Okay. Any discussion on the amendment right now? Okay. So we should read that as a, well, I don't have to read all this again, but just, do you want to, perhaps the clerk can read out the amendment, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, moved by Councillor Trophy and seconded by Councillor Wink, that consideration of agenda item 11.2.16, being a memo to request an extension from the interim control bylaw, be postponed, and that staff be directed to take the necessary actions to convene public meetings in order for council to make a decision on the cannabis interim control bylaw by September 23rd.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the amendment? Okay, any opposed? Okay, amendment passes.
Okay, so on here, it is referred. Okay, so you can sign there and it's referred. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so let's get that to done. Okay. Okay, moving on. Report of Regional Counselor, we do not have one this month. Adoption of minutes. We have a motion put forward by Counselor Trophy, seconded by Counselor Stewart. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. 1, C11, 2019, regular council, June 17th, 2019. 2, special council, 22nd, 2019. Special council, June 12th, I'm sorry, in 2019. Number 3, special council, 2019. June 10th, 2019. Special council, 2019. June 13th, 2019. Number 5, special council, number 25. Special council, June 24th, 2019. And number 6, special council, June 25th, 2019. Any discussion on these minutes? Seeing none, I'll ask for the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. I'm sorry, yep. So now we have no business arising from council minutes. Go to number 8, requests to lift consent agenda items for separate consideration. Anyone have any of these items to be lifted? I see
Through you,
none.
Mr.
Oh,
Mayor.
I'm
That's
sorry.
only dealing with items 9 to 9, or 9.79, 9 to 10. We're only lifting those for now.
Wait,
Just the nines.
Just the nines.
yeah, 9.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so anyone have an item that they would wish to lift and discuss? Okay, not seeing any. Then I will call a motion.
Just read
Yes,
this.
and this is what I've got. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on July 15th, 2019, council agenda be received and recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. Oh, I'm sorry. Motion put forward by Councilor Wink and seconded by Councilor Stewart. Before we pass this is where I ask the questions on the.
If there are any comments, that's correct.
Okay, so before I ask the vote on that, I would like to make some comments on some of the minutes that I pulled, or that I read, and perhaps the counselors could ask some questions that I have in relation to this. So the first one is the minutes of the library board, 9.71, and this question is to you, Councilor Stewart. I see that the CAO, they had 70 applications, they're down to 5. I thought that at one point that the library was going to put off getting their CAO until we heard about the governance issue being settled. Is that still on?
Put it off.
Oh, okay, so this is just all on hold now then?
Yeah, that's the minutes from April 24th.
Ah, okay, sorry. I
No,
didn't-
it's been put off.
So then, looking at the 2019 operating hours reduced by 13 as of May the 15th, is that split between the two branches, or is that all just the Fenwick?
They split it, they reduced the hours in Font Hill by 3 hours, and the hours at Maple Acre by 10 hours.
Maple Acres by 10,
By 10.
wow.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did the last time. I was the dissenting vote.
So you wouldn't know off the, off the top of your head, do you know how many hours that library is open now, or, I apologize for not giving you a heads up on this.
No, it's, it can be looked up on, it doesn't say in there.
No.
It could just be looked up on the library website, because it will have all the hours posted for the two libraries.
Okay. Now-
I did suggest that they post the hours for both libraries on both libraries. So if you go to one and it's closed, you'll know that you could potentially go to the other one.
Yes. So, so the thing that gets me is if we don't have a CAO at that library, that we were paying $175,000, they actually, when they made their budget, they budgeted not having that $175,000, because the question would be asked, if you're not paying a CAO 175, then why cut the hours? No, you wouldn't, theoretically, you're saving that money.
I like you're nodding back there, yeah. I don't understand exactly what's happening there, but I did some independent research, and, you know, we're a small town with 2 small library branches, and I reached out to a number of the other libraries in the municipality, and I think it's about half of them have a CEO and not a deputy CEO. What I find here is that, somewhere between 25 and 30% of our library budget goes to 2 salaries.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
Did you catch that?
so,
Okay. So looking back, and it's just that, here we have a $1.2 million library, a brand-new library, which was being very well utilized by that community. And then to see it reduced by 10 hours, obviously, hopefully,
and they're just putting in a maker's space in that library. They've got a 3D printer, but now they're closed on Saturday mornings.
oh, really, okay. Thank you for that, food for thought. So the next one I was looking at for committees was the Cannabis Committee. Councilor Trophy, either yourself or perhaps the Director of Planning can see that. Let's direct it to the Director of Planning. The cases that have been brought forward, or let's put it this way, have there been any cases so far by any municipality in Ontario that has gone before the Normal Farmer Practices Protection Board that we know of?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there is one case right now that's currently before the Normal Farm Practices Board. It's for an outdoor growing operation. And we're waiting for a decision on that. Right now, they're arguing whether or not the Normal Farm Practices Board even has jurisdiction to hear this case. And that was supposed to have been heard back in beginning of June, June 6th. And it got deferred and put off till this fall, so we're still waiting on that one. That's in a municipality just outside of Ottawa. That's here where that is taking place. So that's the one that we know of. And it's with regards to an outdoor growing operation.
I imagine everyone must be waiting to hear the results.
Lots of
on that
people
one.
are monitoring that one, yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Oh, here's another question, and possibly the council can answer this, my Trophy. You had a Phil Gerard. Did he make a presentation to the committee? And it seemed to me that he wanted to get samples. Was that air samples, or what kind of samples did he want to get?
Phil Gerard first approached town back last fall to work with Director of Planning. I believe it was last fall. You were in contact with him. And then he did meet with our chair and one other member of our Cannabis Control Committee and had a discussion with them. And as of last Thursday, Mr. Gerard and myself toured CanTrust at their request, and him and the company that he worked for, Pinchin, is already taking air samples there. And they're out at a lab, and we should get the results within 3 or 4 weeks.
So air samples outside where the public would be, not inside?
No, outside at the exhaust vents.
Oh, okay, excellent, excellent. And has his company taking samples other places, or that you know of, or is this just getting going, this company?
No, this company's been around for several years, and they do a lot of air sampling. But as far as I know, they're only working with CanTrust right now, and CanTrust hired them directly
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
to get the air samples. And they took several air samples last Tuesday and Wednesday.
Okay. Interesting. And so he took the air samples from the vents on Belfour Street? So, I mean, they just blow right out there.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly which vents they were, but around the perimeter of the
Oh, okay.
facility.
So you guys must be anxiously awaiting those results.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, could we trust their reports?
Pardon me?
After last week, could we
Oh.
trust CanTrust reports after what they did?
If Mike was with them, we can trust them.
I was not with them for the sampling. I was there for the tour. The sampling was done 2 days prior to
To you,
that.
Mr. Mayor,
And
I
this
wouldn't
is yours.
trust them now, whatever they say.
Oh, so then I got looking at the minutes for the 9.74 Pelham Public Art Gallery, and Bob, you're on that.
Correct.
The artist that
I'm-
you
I'm
are.
the- I'm the artist in
Yes.
in the group.
So I see talking about a new new slat wall for downstairs in the concession. So they're gonna put that up to hang paintings in the concession? Oh, what's that all about?
What we have right now, what was designed at the MCC was a system with wires and with clips. And unfortunately, our hockey players are coming by and thinking they're ideal piano players
Oh.
or guitar players. And it's not working very well, especially with the artists have the responsibility. Some of those pictures that they're hanging are worth $2,000. And the agreement we make them sign is that we accept no responsibility, they accept all responsibility.
Okay.
So our incoming artists are not very pleased. And this is a system that has it's a slider, it's permanently mounted, and it'll keep their art and make it well used by the artists. Because we're hoping, we've got a guideline now for artists. You can see a big blanket hanging up, a quilt that we just hung up there.
Yes.
But we've invited all artists from the region to come and display their art. And we hope to change over the art on a monthly basis.
Because we hang a lot of art now in the hallway upstairs heading to the gymnasium, do we not?
But that was hung on the wires.
Oh, that was the wire situation.
And the artists
Okay, and that's where the hockey guys were,
with their sticks.
I can't believe that, but, okay, thank you.
That's the report we got. Maybe it wasn't the hockey players. I shouldn't blame the hockey association.
Of course not, okay. And one question to the director of Van Ravensway. When we did our MOU with Brock University, there was talk that they might bring down some of their art collections or various other things. Have we discussed any other situations with them on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, actually, we did meet with them with regard to their programming. And they have just sent us a proposal last week, and we're reviewing it, and I'll be bringing it to council.
No. Okay, great, thank you. Moving down the list, so then I went to 9.75, the beautification committee. Mike, back to you again. Somehow or other, I just can't see you on the beautification committee. That's okay. So I see.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, nice guy.
It was either me or you, so.
Yeah, well, then they chose the right person, believe me. So I see that they were talking about Christmas trees. How serious were they about putting a Christmas tree at the corner on Pelham and Highway 20? Is that a possibility?
That's a possibility. It came up several times in the meeting. They like to do it, featuring coming into Pelham, something there. Yeah, they're just looking at all possibilities right now.
Okay. And council, I guess, would pick up the nickel on that then, I take it, obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like I said, a couple meetings ago, Pelham Business Association made a donation of $10,000 to the beautification committee, first meeting.
Well, wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they would have got it if you were on there, but
Yeah.
we got it, $10,000.
I appreciate those kind words.
Yeah.
Oh, and you know, one thing that we have to look at when we talk about Christmas, and I realize that's a long way away, but for the longest time, that Gail Balchus and her little army of volunteers, they put those leaves on the lamppost. Is there any discussion about who we're gonna get or how we're gonna replace, who's gonna pick up that slack?
No, right now, there's planning in there, but everything is going through the help of staff because the beautification is just back up and running after a few years.
Oh, okay.
Everything's brand new. It's sort of a learning curve right now.
Sure. And Ms. Van Ravensby, any thoughts on those weeds? Because I know when we were hanging them, and I had the pleasure of being a volunteer the last year, and people would wave and honk and great job, and it really seemed to be appreciated by everybody. What's your thoughts on who we can get to do that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we are meeting with Paul Ryan, one of the organizers of that. And we will be coming up with a workforce to help it to happen. Because we don't want to lose it. It was
No.
a great,
It was.
a great aspect to building community, and yeah, you wake up in the morning and it's decorated.
Yeah,
Isn't
I
that
know you
nice?
were. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Oh, beautification, and then we get down to 9.76, Summerfest, Council Wink. What's the word? The committee all ready to go?
Committee's ready to go. Pray for no rain over the next 4 days, but yeah, we're just cleaning up the final little aspects on our meeting on Wednesday, and we should be fine to go.
Excellent. On your minutes, and not the right place, but you lost a gold level sponsor. A gold level sponsor, did you find another one to replace him, or?
Well, we lost that gold medal sponsor because that particular organization, or the local business was part of a larger organization, and the larger organization is looking at their overall planning and donations to communities, so they had to back out this year,
Okay.
regretfully.
Yep.
I believe we did replace that one, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, our donations are $39,500.
Wow, wow.
For our sponsorships
Yeah,
for this year.
excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Unity comes through yet again, eh? Wow.
Well, with a lot of hard work from town staff.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that probably, then I'm looking at here at the MCC User Group Committee. Our Councilor Mike is on that. And then maybe if you don't know this one, maybe perhaps Vicky can handle this, Ms. Van Ravensway. The summer ice program obviously is well underway. How would, what's the rental? Are we at 90%, 100%? And let's say let's say everything during the day and prime time. How is that looking?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we will be having a report on our summer rentals. If you're talking just the ice, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, so on a normal night, we have ice rentals from 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 10 o'clock at night, Monday to Friday. And during the weekend, you know, it's hit and miss, but
Yep.
Monday to Friday, definitely it's fully booked. Sundays are busy time as well. Saturdays, not as busy as Sunday,
Yeah.
but it's a
Okay.
good response.
And I suppose as in the wintertime, there's some dead hours there during the day, obviously.
Like today, the summer is not as busy as the winter. The winter
Yes.
is totally booked.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Back to, I want to go back to the Pelham Senior Advisory Committee. Mary Ann, Councilor Stewart. So I see and maybe Mrs. Van Ravensway can help here. So I see we got a new grant, or did we apply for it, or did we get this grant for New Horizons grant for $25,000? Perhaps you want to talk to that, Vicki?
Getting warm now. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we definitely did apply for it. We applied for it back in, I believe it was June of 2018. It's a long process. In fact, we thought that they forgot about us. and they announced it, Marianne, can you remember, I think about February, that we received it.
Oh.
So, yeah, we're just thrilled with that, and actually, we can officially announce it now. We had to wait for 2 months
Oh,
until, it's rules, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, after 60 days, we can say that we
Excellent.
did receive the 25,000.
and what do you envision that to be used for?
The grant is for volunteers in Pelham, VIP, it's what you call VIP grant. And it's volunteers in Pelham, and it's centered around the seniors and getting the seniors involved in Pelham Ambassador Program. Also volunteering for the Welcome Center, having speakers come in. It's basically senior programming
Excellent, excellent.
and training.
Okay, Judy,
Yeah.
thank you. And when it's again on this, and this is the last one, folks, and we'll get on with business. It is amazing what you learn in the minute, so I must say. So again with the seniors, and I was there when they presented this grant for $5,000. The Niagara Community Foundation gave that was again to the seniors. Go ahead and explain that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We applied for a $5,000 grant through the Niagara Community Foundation, and we were successful in the full $5,000. And it's what we call the Say It program, and that incorporates having Yale Crosley students work with the seniors. And right now we have roundtable discussions with the students and the seniors. And we also have one main volunteer that is working with the group. And what is going to happen is they will take all the information from the seniors. The seniors are telling stories about what it was like and stories about their life and things like that. And we will have a theater production put on by the seniors and the youth of E.L. Crosley in the fall.
Thank you. And I was there at that presentation, and I cautioned the seniors that they would not have, they couldn't have too risque a story. And the facilitator said the more risque, the better. So it could end up being quite a play. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's it. That's the minute. And we did this so to introduce some of the programs and some of the stuff going on in the town to the new CEO. And David, I hope you appreciate that. Okay, let's move along. What do we got?
Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry. Yes, Councilor Trophy.
Yeah, just while we're on the user groups and the minutes there's one, the MCC hospitality group. It started off a little slow early in the year because we only had 2 members. Well, we got 4 now, so we have a group, and on the June 11th meeting, Patricia Shannon was elected the chair and Bill Huseman vice chair. So we have a full group there going now again. We're looking at a working group, and now it is a committee.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you. Good luck. Happy success on that committee. What do you hope? What's your terms of reference on a hospitality group?
Well, we're looking at increasing revenue between the rooms that we have in there, the concessions, and et cetera.
Okay, great.
So there's a comedy show coming up at the end of the month, July 27th. Yeah, and then Miss Van Riebensway would have a little bit more information on that as well.
Oh, okay. Van, or do you want to talk on that now? Go ahead.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have our second comedy night coming up. And from what I understand, the tables are almost all sold out. So if you want your tickets, you will have to get them very shortly.
I think as a weekend they were sold out.
As of this weekend, they were?
Last weekend, he said there was like 7 tickets left.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty
Your first one sold out as well.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so we're really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was at the first one. It was a hoot. Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah,
It's
it's
the same concept. They're going to numerous comedians. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank
This
you.
time you're sitting closer to the front, though. I understand.
Yeah. We were. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we have a motion put forward by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the July 15th, 2019 council agenda be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is carried.
May I have Councillor Hildebrand's report?
Pardon me?
So your next item is
No,
Councillor
no, no,
Hildebrand's.
Bob. Yeah, okay, and we have a report by Councillor Hildebrand on the Niagara Road 12 Landfill Citizens Liaison Committee. Take it away, Councillor Hildebrand.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Did we not miss the items for separate consideration, if any?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, nothing was pulled for separate consideration.
Could I pull some now? Which I think I have the right to.
So under item 8 is the request to lift consent items for separate consideration.
That's what I asked that question.
And it says only for number 9.
And you said only for number 9,
For the nines.
for the 9s.
All of the 9s?
Yes.
So
So
what
I
is the
wanna-
item?
So the numbers I want to pull is 11.2.4.
So those are separate items on the agenda. We haven't reached that spot yet.
We haven't got there yet.
They're separate items?
They're separate items already.
Yeah, they're gonna be next, after Bob, after
So
Councillor
right now, we're on
Hildebrand.
11.1.1,
Okay, so those
and
items
each of
will be.
those will be separate,
Okay.
okay?
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yeah, with regards to garbage, we're in a unique position. We don't have a garbage problem. We've got a site that's gonna be open till 2048, which is really unique. And it's an engineered site. It doesn't smell. You don't have any bugs, any animals. It's really an amazing site. There's very few engineered sites in Ontario. Most of the sites are just old quarries, and all they do is dump the stuff in and try and control the smell and put up fences to try and control the garbage bags going there. If the US ever closes the borders for the garbage going over to the US, specifically coming from Toronto and those kind of areas, Ontario will be in a big problem. Because a lot of our garbage, there's no place to put them. So really, Grimsby, West Lincoln, Lincoln, and Pelham are in a unique position. The dump right now is expected to last 25 years, and because of it's an engineered dump, which is totally different. You can read my report. We're expecting the lifespan now to reach 2048,
Wow.
which is amazing.
Yeah.
When I was assigned to the committee, I didn't know what to expect, but it's been great.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to mention with regard to garbage pickup, the region obviously is in charge, and they've done a lot of things. I was in contact with them this morning, and they've dedicated a recruiter, and they've got a schedule, and they've got backup staff now to handle, contractors to handle the problems we've been having in Pelham with regards to pickup every day. Because I don't get called about the dump, I get called about garbage being left at the curb.
Yes, yes.
And thank you for electing me to that committee.
And thank you for doing such a great job.
Thanks.
Okay, motion put forward by, any questions on the council's report by, first of all, okay, I'm not seeing any. Motion put forward by Councillor Trophy, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be resolved that council receive for information, the Niagara 12 Landfill Citizens Liaison Committee report on June 2019 submitted by Councillor Hildebrand. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. 11.2.1, 2020 budget schedule. Be it resolved that council approves the 2020 budget schedule. Debate on this, motion put forward by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Kaur. I'll repeat it again. Be it resolved that council approves the 2020 budget schedule. This obviously has been a schedule drawn up by our Director Treasurer, Ms. Quinlan. Any debate after looking through the schedule? It looks like we're going to get it done a lot sooner than April. That we did last year.
Goals before the end of the fiscal year. Is the
Yeah,
goal.
yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, perhaps, Madame, you any question? You have any statements or?
Last year, obviously this year it was later because we had an election. so we had to wait for after the election. But the goal for this year is to have the capital operating and water wastewater budgets completed before Christmas.
Wow, excellent.
Start the new fiscal year with approved budgets.
Thank you. Any debate on that schedule? Not seeing any. I asked the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Wow, we got a lot of yellow. Motion put forward by Councilor Wink, seconded by Councilor Stewart. Be resolved that council receive report 2019-0010 from the fire department. The council endorses the Emily project and authorizes staff to add rural 911 signage to the current 911 sign program. And perhaps before council debates that, perhaps we'll hear from the chief as to give us a quick outline on what this program, what brought this program on and what it represents.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, we've been working on this for over a year now, but tragically, a few years ago, there was a young girl that was killed in a farm accident and out in the west part of Ontario. EMS, fire, had a very difficult time locating her because the farm that she got injured on, it was a piece of property without a building on it. And currently, if you have a piece of property that doesn't have a building on it, you can't have a number assigned, or you can't have a sign, like an address assigned to it. So unfortunately, through her death, the family stepped up, and her name was Emily. And they came up with this program that, so rural properties, farm properties that do not have buildings on, we will assign them proper addresses, and we'll locate the cross culverts. And you know the current 911 signs now in the rural areas we use to locate properties, so whatever number you're at. These signs will be the same, but they'll be different colors. They'll be black and yellow.
Okay.
So we get dispatched 2011 Roland Road. We're not looking for a building. We're looking for, it's a rural property. It's, Junkin's farm.
Yep.
Then it helps us locate patients.
Excellent.
So it's kind of new into the region. We would be the first municipality in Niagara to get the program rolling, but there's a few others that are right behind us. So.
And this is probably a silly question. When you get that number, do you put that number in a GPS, or do you go? But that number, I guess, obviously is associated with the road. So you just go down the road looking for the number. You don't have it located electronically someplace.
No, the planning department, and probably if the director of planning would like to add to it, but we would, the farmer would come to planning and say, I want to have one of these signs. They would assign the number to that property and then give us the information, and then we take care of the rest of it.
Okay.
Install and everything. So we don't know if the numbers stay in sequence, like it doesn't. Maybe Barb would like to expand on that.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we would certainly make the numbers in sequence so that they fit within the block length of what the, if there are any existing numbers, that we're not creating confusion out there in numbering, so that they are consistent. Currently, right now, all the green municipal addressing 911 numbers do go to a variety of organizations and people, so they're to the fire and dispatch and all of that, and they are put into, mapping programs and that kind of stuff, so that we'll be working with the same organization so that they would eventually get mapped as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Councilor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Planning. Does EMS recognize this program?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, yes, EMS does recognize it, and it's been, it's a grassroots program that's been spearheaded by this family and by other volunteers, but it is certainly something that's recognized.
Thank you. And, Lisa? Councilor Hahn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so you say recognized, what about supported?
Mr. Mayor, through you, in terms of support, we would collect a fee for these signs. Right now, when we assign municipal addressing to rural properties when people come in for a building permit. That's one of the fees, and so we collect a fee. It's $100 for one of these address signs.
So, but the EMS was consulted and they support this initiative? Yeah, okay. And so as far as, are we reliant then on people just to pick up our minutes from the meeting and go, okay, I want to go in and pay my $100 and get a sign? Or are we going to do a little bit of an advertising campaign? Or do you have any plans thus far on how we're going to promote this?
Mr. Mayor, I'll let the chief answer that question.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I've been involved with the local farm association. It's a proper name for it.
OFA.
The OFA.
So I've been going to their meetings and been in contact with them, so all the farmers that come to the meetings, they know that we're working on this project. I've notified them that I'm bringing it to council tonight, and I think they're anxiously waiting to see your decision. And I think the mayor's kind of graciously offered to be the first participant in the program, so just waiting for your $100. That's all.
So can I make a suggestion too, that in a communication that we all have, whether it's in the, the communique that we have sometimes with our bills or utility bills, that kind of thing, if we could just put a little piece in there about that, if we're going to approve this tonight, assuming that that's the case, that we use that opportunity just to let people know.
Yeah, no, we were gonna use our website and our communications,
Okay, good.
and I'd like to do a story, the first person that steps up to the plate and applies for it, when we go to install the sign, we'll do a whole paper piece and pictures and
Great.
and have that going. So yes, we do have that plan.
I saw another hand.
It was answered. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions on this program? See none. Then I call it to, that council endorses the Emily project and authorizes staff to add rural 9/11 signage to the current 9/11 sign program. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Motion put forward by Councillor Trophy, seconded by Councillor Corr. Be it resolved that council receive report RCW 2019-00017, and that council directs staff to proceed with the request for proposal to provide and install a fully accessible metal/plastic activity structure with conventional features, i.e. climbers, slides, swing set including engineered compacted wood fiber surface for a total cost of up to $95,000. This is of course for the Lookout Park Playground, resulting from the equipment survey update of 2019-00-2017 recreation. Anyway, so this is about the Lookout Park Playground. Any discussion on this resolution? Councilor Trophy.
Yeah, is there any equipment included for the Wheelan Height Park, the smaller park there?
We'll go to the Director of Recreation.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as approved by council, what is happening right now, the plans that were approved by council, which included the slides and the accessible, I call it the bog and run, but the berm area. And we're working with one of the residents on fundraising for a piece of equipment to go into the area that will be large enough to hold one piece of equipment, as approved by council.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, how much do you think that extra piece of equipment would cost? I believe a couple meetings ago, there was some money left over for parks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
That would be available in December.
I'll let the Director of Finance speak on the money issue. But approximate cost, because the original plan, Ben and Stock will be installing the surface, which is basically double the price of the equipment. You could probably get a piece of equipment for, I don't know, $40,000-$50,000.
Did you want perhaps
Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that the $95,000 was all that was left to be allocated to this park. the other money that was, either donated or saved was part of getting the turf prepared. And I think part of this is the area that this equipment is going to be prepped and ready for the equipment just to go on. And so some of that money was used for that, because that whole area has to be prepared and drained. So, this is the last bit of the money that needed to be allocated was the 95,000. Either we went with the naturalized park or we went with the regular equipment. That was the last decision that had to be made.
Thank you.
I have another question, sorry.
Yep.
Is there opportunity to add equipment to this playground, to these two parks next year? I'm not sure who can answer that one.
Absolutely. We can identify it in our capital budget for 2020. Absolutely.
Okay, and then last question. The way the park will be constructed with that playground equipment, will it be equivalent to the award-winning parks that we currently have throughout the town? Or would they be getting a little bit less of a park?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, all of our parks have pathways, open areas, they have playground equipment, and our, these parks will not have the turf, they will have the wood fiber, engineered wood fiber surface, which, you know, some say is just as good or better. That will be the only difference, but it will be no different than, you know, it'll be fully accessible. They will have play structure as well as swings in that park, as well as paths, open area to play. A lot of the homes have smaller backyards, so it's important as well to have open area.
My last question, I think. With this park, at one point, through the couple of public consultations, there was talk about a pavilion. Is that still in the works or no?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there was thought at one point that we would have an opportunity for a donation of a pavilion. We researched that, and we don't, basically. If that was a wish, that would be additional. That would need to be budgeted for in a separate year.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, so the council directs staff to proceed with the request for proposal to provide and install fully accessible with conventional features, i.e. climbers, slides, swing set including engineered compacted wood fiber surface for a total cost of up to $95,000. All those in favor of this motion? All those opposed? Motion carries. Motion put forward by Councilor Trophy, seconded by Councilor Wink. Be resolved, the council receive the report RCW 2019-00016, and the council approve the amendments to Municipal Alcohol Management Policy S100-01 as presented. Any discussion on that?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we defer this until September 16th because it didn't show up on our committee of the whole meetings. And I think it should be on the committee of the whole before it comes to council. And there's a lot of these tonight that did not show up on the committee at a whole, so that gives us an opportunity to debate it properly and also have input from our residents. So we're asking us to make a decision today, but going through the proper procedures of the committee of the whole first. And if I'm wrong, then
Perhaps we'll let the clerk comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if it does get referred to a committee, respectfully, I would suggest it go to the Policy and Priorities Committee, which that normally would be the second meeting of the month, but with the recent changes to the procedural bylaw, it's now the first meeting of the month, so I believe the next PMP meeting would be September 3rd. The reason some reports are coming to council is that there was a need for them to have a decision sooner rather than later. And because we don't have committee meetings as part of our summer schedule, they were brought directly to council for council's discussion and consideration. The applicable directors would be able to report on whether or not there would be any legal ramifications in terms of Ontario regulations by postponing.
And Director of Recreation, was that you that brought this forward?
I did.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the reason why this is being brought forward and the amendments that have been indicated here, it's mainly housekeeping. There's nothing that is basically, when we had our annual meeting with our AGCO inspector, we reviewed our policy, and it had not been updated since 2013. And as we all know, the alcohol policies are changing rapidly, and this needed to be updated. So we basically have taken out some facilities, we've added facilities. This is not only for the towns, this is our alcohol policy that every rental uses as well. If someone is using one of our facilities, they're given this policy, they have to abide by it. So it's basically just cleaning it up. And this is our busiest time for rentals, it's the summer, and for events. So it's basically due diligence.
Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, what's another week or 3 weeks so we can have input from the community and also we can have proper debating with these issues? And one of the issues I have is number 3, all alcohol beverages stored in inventory at the town facilities. So we're going to be storing alcohol in town hall, in our facilities? Before it was removed from town facilities, now you're adding inventory to town facilities.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, as you're aware, we do have, the MCC is fully licensed. We do not remove the alcohol from the facility. It's stored under lock and key. It's inventoried by 2 separate people. So we have a whole procedure that has been worked on through the audit committee. And yeah, that's mainly because we, in the past, would never have the alcohol stored at the facility, but now since we are a licensed facility, again, we needed to update the policy.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so then why don't we just state at the MCC, not the town facility, so we could store alcohol at the garage on Tice Road, we could store alcohol here. That's what I read. And if you want to say you just want to store alcohol at the MCC, then call it the MCC.
We could call it the MCC.
It's fine, but I think we need to debate this and we need to move it. Again, it's only 2 or 3 weeks out, so.
Making a motion to refer it back to postpone consideration to the next PMP. Do we need a second?
Yes,
Okay.
I want to defer it
Yeah,
back to.
okay, so you need it, so the council, we were just discussing. Okay, okay, go ahead, Councilor Trophy.
Yeah, so this question would be, I guess, to the Director of Recreation. If this was deferred to September, is there any repercussions with our Thursday night festivities and what's going on at MCC now and Summerfest with this policy? Like, does this policy need to be in place? Or can we, it won't hurt, because I do agree with Councilor Kaur, some of the wording could be changed there, just so we're clear when we move forward. Once a policy is done, it's done, and there's a few of a bit of the wording that could be changed.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it can be postponed.
It won't affect nothing.
It wouldn't really affect anything. We can, I will be in contact with our AGCO inspector to let them know, so he realizes as well.
Okay, thank you.
Then I would like to second Councilor Kaur's motion to postpone it to September so we can get the proper wording on there. Just
Okay.
change up the wording.
to
So then
vote
I'll
on
vote.
that motion to postpone?
Pardon me?
Do you have a motion to
Yeah.
postpone, moved by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Chofie?
Okay, so that.
So you need to vote on the
On the
postponement.
postponement.
It
So all
replaces this
those,
motion.
okay. So all those in favor of the motion put forward by Councilor Corr to postpone this until.
We set a date, though? Just so
I
that-
believe we,
There is a date, policy and
There's
procedure.
a policy and procedures meeting of September.
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. Okay, no, that's
Which
fine,
is
as
the
long as
first week
I
of
don't lose sight of it.
Okay, so all those in favor of postponing till the next policy and procedures meeting in September, yeah, please vote. Okay, and all those against? Yes. Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Wait, just lost.
No, it's postponed. So it's referred
Oh, okay. Thank you.
to PNP, September. Okay?
Motion put forward by Councilor Corr, seconded by Councilor Trophy. Be it resolved that council receive report number 2019-0027, Public Works, and that council approve an all-way stop at Station Street and Summersides Boulevard. Discussion on this motion. And if I may, perhaps if the director would want to speak to any traffic studies or what have you?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the council. On the request of council, staff did perform a traffic analysis and a warrant for a four-way stop control at the intersection of Summersides Boulevard, Station Street, and Pelham Town Square. So this was following the deferral of the roundabout, and which was to be constructed this year. So following that direction, staff retained the services of Associated Engineering, reputable engineering company in Niagara. They completed a warrant study for that intersection based on the criteria of a minor road network system. The requirements for a four-way stop controlled intersection is that there are in excess of 350 vehicles at the highest peak hour for that intersection, and that there is a 60, with four-way stop, I believe it's a 65-35% split between the intersection, traffic on the intersecting roads, which means you don't want to have a lot of traffic on just one of the roads. You want to make sure that there's a good mix of traffic to warrant the four-way stop. Upon the conclusion of the investigation, it was determined that there was over 400 vehicles from each direction at that intersection, so in excess of 350. That's the minimum requirement. As well, the volume split was 54% on Station Street and 46% on the side road. So it did, in fact, warrant a four-way stop. So this report basically is coming to council to say good job on asking for that warrant, and that this will be a bylaw that staff will be preparing to bring forward to council for enactment.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from councilors? No? Okay. So then, and that council approve an all-way stop at Station Street and Summersides Boulevard. And no further discussion. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Motion put forward by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Wink. Report regarding the paving of the Steve Bauer Trail. Be it resolved that council receive report number 2019-0033, Public Works, and that council remove the red circle from this project and allow it to proceed. Before I open it to council, perhaps the Director of Public Works could give a little background on that, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This is a project that was presented as part of the 2019 capital budget. It was for an active transportation improvement to our network. This is a project that we have received a grant and funding on through the Ontario Municipal Commuter Cycling Program. So, Town of Pelham was successful in receiving $75,416, which represents 75% of an improvement project for active transportation in the town of Pelham. So the town is required to contribute 25% of the cost of the project, which would represent approximately $25,000. And when the grant was submitted, there was 4 projects that were included as part of this grant. The Steve Bauer Trail paving being one of those. So the limits of the project are from the town line, just off of Line Avenue, on Line Avenue, almost near the Timber Creek entrance, north to Merritt, and then following on the other side of Merritt, from Merritt to Port Robinson Road. So that gravel trail that's exists now, the idea is that would be paved hard surface. So that was one of the projects. That was a project that was recommended that we move forward with. The other projects that were identified as possibilities under that grant was a project on Canberra Road, which would involve the removal of rumble strips that exist along the shoulder of the road now and make it difficult for cyclists to use that road safely. So the idea with that project would be to go in, remove those rumble strips and repave a shoulder to accommodate cyclist traffic. The other project was a signing project for the town of Pelham for the active transportation trails. The final project that was included as part of that grant was paving of the spur line from Hurricane Road to the Thorold limit. So staff had recommended at the time of the budget process that we proceed with the paving of the Steve Bauer Trail. With the formulation of the Pelham Active Transportation Committee, the projects were brought to that committee, and although the minutes are only in draft form and not available to council yet, the Pelham Active Transportation Committee did endorse the project for paving of the Steve Bauer Trail. So that's been endorsed by their committee, although we don't have the minutes to present to council in final form. In addition, the Pelham Active Transportation Master Plan has identified the Steve Bauer Trail as a trail that would receive upgrades in future years. So that's why at this point in time, staff, on the recommendation of the committee, are bringing forward now to council to ask for approval to lift the red circle on this project so that we can proceed. And the timing of this would be, I believe that the grant is still open next year. Yep. We're getting ready to put our resurfacing contract out, which will be out for tender in the next week. So this would be a good opportunity to include this portion of the work as part of that contract to try to take advantage of economies of scale and get the best pricing we can. So that's why this report is being brought to your attention today.
Thank you. Questions? Councilor Link.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so are you proposing that the work gets done this year as opposed to next year?
Yes, that's correct. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we would be looking at awarding a contract to a paving company, a contractor, and the plan would be to have this project completed this year.
So that's a further $25,000 hit to our operating or capital budgets this year that we didn't have the money for.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a separate line item outside of the resurfacing contracts that we have. So, in essence, yes, there's $25,000 that was red circled as part of the 2019 capital budget. But yes, it was identified in that 2019 capital budget.
It was identified, but we agreed not to spend it this year. That's my understanding.
Yes.
That's correct.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, don't forget there's a grant attached to this one, so we have to spend the money. I mean, we would have $25,000 for that. What was the grant, 75,000?
75,000.
So we have a $75,000 grant and the 25,000. The reason why it was red circled was because we had to, I think, come back and finalize what the decision is. We could wait till next year, but I think it has to be finished by March 31st of 2020.
So I recall in our initial discussions with this, we had until December 31st, 2020 to complete this project.
Okay, I thought it was March, okay, I can double check that.
The further question on this is staff hasn't identified what ongoing maintenance costs of this trail would be.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this was a question that was brought up during the budget process, and we discussed this project. The minimum maintenance standards suggest that if there's a hard surface path or trail, sidewalk, that it needs to be maintained to the minimum maintenance standards. In consultation and speaking with our operations manager, because it's a multi-use trail, we could designate post signs that it's not a cleared path, and could be also used for cross-country skiing or the sort. So staff does not agree that we have to keep this a bare surface and maintain this to a standard of a sidewalk. This could be considered a multi-use trail.
Which is great. That's new information that we didn't have prior, and it's not in the report. My final question would be, if we pave this surface, how long does a paved surface normally last?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, this is, it's an asphalt surface, which does deteriorate over time, and there will be future maintenance required on this pathway. A good example would be a golf course, the cart paths on a golf course, which actually receive light traffic. In this instance, we wouldn't expect that we would see anything larger than cyclists, that type of thing on it. Salting also deteriorates a pavement. In this case, I don't see us
We're not gonna salt it, so.
salting it, so that would extend the life of the pavement. For a year, I wouldn't have a year, depend on the conditions and how it lasts, but it would perform better than a roadway surface.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I live on the Steve Bauer Trail, and I don't consider the roadway an acceptable comparison, because I live there, and what happens is, it's basically a cinder drive right now. What happens is all the tree branches and the tree roots, that's what's pushing all the stuff up. And as a cyclist, that's what makes it very rough going through there. And even if we pave it, that's what you see, all the paving, it just breaks up in there. So basically, I don't see that the proper allocation if we are gonna spend $25,000. But I, like Councillor Wink, we did say it was red circled, and we delayed it till next year in the budget.
Councilman Hahn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so it's 3 meters wide, correct? That's the standard that we have to follow according to the transportation, I guess what we've got right now for the Pelham Transportation Guide, 3 meters wide.
That's 9 feet.
So, yeah, so it says the town should improve the section of the Steve Bauer Trail between Port Robinson Road and Quaker Road, and this is actually from the Active Transportation Master Plan, the recommendations. To an asphalt surface and minimum width of 3 meters to improve accessibility for all users. Example, those with limited mobility and moms with strollers, and promote year-round use. So then the question I asked as well, what's the upkeep on that? So sweeping cracks, filling the cracks, replacement, snow plowing, all those kinds of things. But also too, what if council doesn't approve the report? What happens there? I realize there's a grant of 75, but we're spending 25 to get 75. So because I do actually walk that quite frequently, I have to say it just hasn't been upkept. So if we're able to use the money for even just tree trimming and clearing it into a better condition than it already is, that will, considering the stretch that we have, that's going to eat a big chunk of money, because there's a lot of tree trimming that needs to be done. There's a lot of, perhaps we can put park benches, perhaps we can have garbage cans to encourage people to actually put their pet waste in a proper spot. Those kinds of things, like, are we not able to use the money in that fashion, so that we're not actually having to then cough up $25,000 for pavement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the conditions of the grant say that they will contribute up to 75% of the project. Depending on, we've got $75,000 allocated to us. If we only spend $50,000, right? So the idea is that the town has to contribute 25% to the cost of the project. So there will be ongoing maintenance with an asphalt path for sure. In speaking with the Active Transportation Committee, there was some thoughts around that creating a hard surface would make it more accessible for people. If it's council's wish to defer this project, we have till next year to complete that. project and try to take advantage of those funds. The projects that were identified as part of the grant, the 4 that I recommended earlier, would be the ones that would be on the table. We have not gone back to the committee to ask for, not the committee, the grant, to see if we can add additional projects. That would be something that we could also do, but just to keep in mind that the Active Transportation Committee, as part of the Transportation Master Plan, have identified those 4 projects as something that they would like to see moving forward.
Councilor Wayne?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, one thing with Pelham Active Transportation Committee, they're looking at the Steve Bauer Trail connecting to other trails in Welland, and they're also looking at connecting trails to Thorold. The Welland trails are paved. They want the consistency, and quite frankly, we've met Reese Evans, and he's got some limitations and whatever, and the way the path is right now, it's not accessible to wheelchairs, whereas a paved trail would allow for that. My issue is the timing. I'm fully in favor at this point of endorsing the project. It's just the timing of the project.
Councilor Trophy?
Yeah, if we were to go ahead with this, and speaking on what Councilor Hildebrand was mentioning with all the tree roots and everything, would all that be corrected prior to paving, or else that paving would just lift in no time?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The operations department, we have an operations budget to maintain trails. So, and to Councilor Hahn's concerns, tree trimming, branch clearing, our operations department takes care of that under operations budget. So prior to completing the paving on the path, we would actually have an inspection to see if there's any deficiencies that would need to be taken care of prior to performing that work. Again, the operations end of things will deal with the ditching and the tree clearing and branch removal, stuff like that. So to answer your question, yes, we won't pave over
Higher. Yeah, we'll go up and down.
Director, so when you apply the surface, are we digging 2 or 3 inches, or are we just going to put the asphalt on top of the existing landscape? Are we digging it out and putting stone in similar to a proper driveway?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is a stone base there currently, so this project would involve some fine grading operations, which involve shaping the surface. May require some additional stone to do that, and then we would be paving on top of that 2 inches of asphalt.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, how many kilometers of trail are we actually talking for $100,000, approximately?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the stretch between Port Robinson and Merritt Road is 2.3 kilometers, and then I believe there's a short stretch down to the limits of between the town of Pelham and the city of Welland, so it would be just shy of 3 kilometers.
And the 100,000 would cover it to do the whole thing?
Yes, that's based on the estimates that were in the active transportation plan and my rough calculations. Based on my estimating experience, that would be in line, correct?
One question before you sit down. Oh, I'm sorry, were you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, okay, thank you. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
So, and then these trails that they're hooking up to, they're hooking up to paved trails, so it'd be along, no?
To Welland it is.
Oh, okay, I thought that, somewhere in the conversation, that we were the unpaved section hitch, but we're not. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, so the section that we're talking about between Port Robinson Road and Merritt would be completely paved. That trail would be paved. You have to cross Merritt Street on Line Avenue. The trail continues and it runs down just past the entrance to the subdivision of Timber Creek. That's where the city of Welland picks up. So we don't actually get all the way down to Quaker. It's about halfway down. That's where our limit stops, so that's where the paving would stop. The town, or the city of Welland does not have plans this year to complete the paving on that path.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Yeah, Councilor Hahn?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so just for clarity, you didn't give me a full answer on, so it's it says, a minimum width of 3 meters. So the amount that you budgeted for, the amount of your estimate is based on 3 meters? Or are we talking about that money, but it's 2 meters, or what's the width?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we would not go in to reconstruct the pathway. We would pave on what was existing. To the councilor's question, I would have to report back to council on the exact width of that platform, but it would be in the area of between 2 and 3 meters. We would not go in to expand that platform at all. It would be very costly to do that, and we would not be in favor of doing that underneath that budget for sure.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Would there be any barricades included to prohibit dirt bikes or four-wheelers, just for safety, or is that going to be an extra after?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at the start of the trail on the Line Avenue, there would not be, there wouldn't be any gates or bollards installed. There are currently gates installed at the limits between Port Robinson and Merritt, and we could definitely look at installing some bollards in there to prevent four-wheel vehicles or anything larger to go through. Right now, a vehicle cannot enter the pathway based on the configuration of the barricades. So it would be basically restricting to trying to keep the snowmobiles and four-wheelers, that type of thing off it.
Dirt bikes.
Yeah, staff would have to look at what's in place now and whether that prevents the use of the trail with those pieces of equipment. And if required, the town could install some additional bollards in place to prevent other vehicles from using the trail. So those are roughly about $500 per piece installed for single bollard.
So the challenge must be to keep motorized vehicles off and yet at the same time be wide enough to let wheelchairs go through. Do you take that into account?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, it's a multi-use path, so to the councilor's question, the exact width of the pathway, I don't have that with me. I can get that, but the idea would be to restrict access at the access points to only allow cyclists and prevent larger vehicles and four-wheel type vehicles and snowmobiles from entering that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I know I was driving out in the town of Wainfleet, Port Colborne, and out in the middle of nowhere, going way into the distance was indeed a paved path. Now, I don't know if that was it must have been on top of a railway bed, so of course you've got all kinds of stone and what have you under there, but I thought it was pretty amazing that they had this asphalt path, not a house in sight, and there it went as far as you could see. So, whatever that means, I don't know. But it was pretty impressive to see a paved path heading down the distance. Okay, so we gotta make a decision here. Any other comment? Okay, so the motion is, be it resolved that council receive the report and that council remove the red circle from this project and allow it to proceed. The vote is, all those in favor, raise your hands. All those against? I believe it stays red circled. Motion fails.
Looked at again in 2020.
Yeah, so Jason,
It's good till 2020, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely, we can take another look at those projects moving forward as part of the 2020 capital budget.
Okay, so that grant, so this tonight doesn't affect that grant then?
No.
Okay, thank you. Motion put forward by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Wink. Report regarding the rehabilitation of Sulphur Springs Drive. Be it resolved that council receive report number 2019-0031 and the council approve Public Works recommendation to proceed with fully rehabilitating Site 1 in 2019. Again, before opening up to council, perhaps we should have a report from the Director of Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is again a project that was identified as part of the 2019 capital budget. We identified 2 sites for restoration on Sulphur Spring Drive. The first site is located just up from Luffman Avenue off of Effingham. At that location, it's a complete loss of the roadway. So there are no vehicles that are able to pass at this point in time. In fact, the roadway is closed off with barriers and there is no access through that site from the south. The second site is located about 200 meters from Orchard Hill Drive, further to the north. This is an area where a section of the roadway has collapsed. There's a gabion baskets that are acting to stabilize the road. They are failing. So we are progressively losing the road with each additional storm surge that we have and as the erosion takes place. However, the roadway is in a safe condition right now. We've got barrels barricading off that area and the roadway does remain open. There are residents that are located between the 2 sites. So at this point in time, all the access is from the north end on Sulphur Springs Drive. And again, there is no access from the south. This assignment has been awarded, the engineering assignment and feasibility study was awarded to a company called Water's Edge. They're a fluvial geomorphologist engineer. So they are very concerned with, well, their specialty is in with dealing with erosion issues, water issues with respect to creeks and tributaries and the protection of the environment in constructing these projects. So they developed 8 solutions, which range from keeping the road closed, giving the road way back to the public and making it a private road, dissolving the town's interest in it, to various types of engineering approaches to resolve the problems. A hard engineering approach, which would include a riprap material or an armor stone material that would be used to help stabilize the banks and basically stabilize the erosion so that we can rebuild the road. They looked at some other approaches which involve some vegetated slopes that would allow us to reinstate the banks and try keep away from a hard engineering approach. So when you looked at all the possibilities, the area that we're dealing with is very environmentally sensitive. So we've got the 12-Mile Creek, which is the last cold water tributary and stream in Niagara, and we also have protected lands outside of our roadway allowance. Some of their approaches, especially the softer approaches, looked at relocating the road onto environmentally sensitive lands, and we don't want to get into the business of relocating a roadway onto environmentally sensitive lands for obvious reasons. When the budget was prepared for rehabilitation of the 2 sites, there was a hard engineering approach, to be honest with you. That was kind of what was anticipated, some type of armor stone type retaining wall that would be put in place to allow us to basically build a vertical wall, build the road in behind in its original right-of-way, and open the road back up. So the original budget for the project at that time was $250,000 to restore both sites. We were engaged by an organization called Trout Unlimited Canada from their Niagara chapter. We brought a report, staff brought a report to council. Trout Unlimited was here to do a presentation to council with respect to entering into a partnership with the town of Pelham to work towards environmentally friendly solutions and the protection and basically looking after the health and the well-being of the 12-Mile Creek, which council was in support of, as well as staff. So following those meetings, we had a draft report from Water's Edge. We ended up supplying that report to Trout Unlimited for review and comment. They came back with some comments. We worked with Water's Edge to develop what they called a hybrid solution, which involved more of an environmentally friendly approach, but also work to keep the road within our road allowance, so we weren't disturbing lands outside of our road allowance. So the idea of using some type of hard system like an armor stone retaining wall is out the window, and we're now looking at an environmentally friendly approach to the rehabilitation, which would include a soil stabilized slope, which in essence is using geotextile material to build your road back up, and using that geotextile to reinforce that road allows you to get a steeper slope, a 2-to-1 slope, and then using a fish-friendly erosion control at the toe of the slope, which would prevent the erosion and possible problems down the road with respect to the erosion of the slope. So those budgets for the project increased. In addition, in dealing with the consultant as part of the feasibility report, we identified that at Site 2, they weren't including the full scope of repair on the whole stretch. They were only including areas where the gabion baskets were failed. I think this is probably not the right approach at this point in time. We could fix it, go in and do spot repairs, but over time, I feel that those gabion baskets will fail, and we'll be back in there again doing another restoration project. As a result, the project has gone from our original budget of $250,000 to just under $500,000 for both sites. So obviously that's above our budget for this project. So in consultation with our consultant and using this hybrid approach, staff is coming forward tonight with a report to recommend that we move ahead with the restoration of site number 1. Trout Unlimited has reviewed the scope of work and the proposal that we've got in place now based on the feasibility study. They are not in favor of opening the roadway at site 1. In fact, they would like to keep that roadway closed and turn it into a pedestrian and cyclist path and hiking trail. So they have recommended that we rehabilitate site 2 and we leave site 1 closed to traffic. So as a municipality, in order for us to go ahead and close a road, there's certain processes we need to go through. So I feel on this, if we were to close permanently the roadway, there is some level of restoration that we would need to do at site 1 regardless. And then we would have to go through a municipal class environmental assessment process, which is a public consultation process, and we bring in agencies to review. And that will determine what the proposed solution is moving forward. As a municipality, we just can't make a unilateral decision to close a road. Trout Unlimited says that they have contacted the residents within that stretch, and they're in favor of keeping the road closed. Staff have not gone ahead and done that consultation with the residents yet, but the scope of work for any public consultation process would not be just limited to those residents itself. It would encompass everybody. So, as well as the agencies that would be involved, Niagara Escarpment Commission, the Department of Fisheries, Ministry of Environment Conservation Authority. So, the long and short of it is we don't have enough budget to do both sites as part of the 2019 budget. The site 2, my initial thoughts on this was to go ahead and rehabilitate site 2 this year, even though that the estimates that they're coming back with are slightly over the budget that's been approved in the 2019 capital budget. And then, if council wished, we would move forward with the consultation process to look at options for site 1 and how we handle that. The important thing to know is that the solution that we have in place now, when we reconstruct site 2, we will be closing the road for approximately 2 weeks to have this construction completed, which limits any access to these properties. So that would create a problem with respect to logistics of construction. And in my opinion, even if we were to reconstruct Site 2 and reconsider closing down the roadway at Site 1, we would still have to put some type of access in at Site 1 so that we could properly go ahead and construct Site 2. The other issue we're up against is it is a cold water stream, very environmentally sensitive, and there are certain in-water working restrictions that you need to abide by when doing these types of projects. So as right now, we're looking at a window for in-water construction works, which means anything within the water course itself would have to be completed between July 1st and August 31st. So we're up against a short window here on doing any type of project. The design is probably at 80–90% complete, and we still have to go through the tendering period on this. So the timing on this report coming to council for approval to move forward is very sensitive in nature. Any deferral of the report and the recommendation to proceed with the Site 1 would more than likely delay the project completely till next year, or we wouldn't be able to work within
I want to comment. So I want to comment first before I open it to council. Number one, I'm very glad that we are not skimping, whatever we do here, I'm glad that we're not skimping and just treating that cold water stream as a ditch. That's happened too long in the past, and we got to show that stream some respect. And if that costs us another 50 or 60 or 100,000 bucks, so be it. That's the environment is everything. That stream, that whole drive down there, whether it is a hiking trail or I hope it stays open as a road, that has got to be our number one priority, is to protect that stream and the environment down there. And like I say, whatever the cost, to a limit. It's in our strategic plan to be to protect, get along with the environment. So that is, and I'm glad to see we're with Trout Unlimited. That's a well-known institution Canada-wide. I'm glad we have them on board with this. That being said, I know that they keep pushing for the walking path somewhere along the line, and the road is there to assist the people that are living there. If somehow or other we can do a bona fide survey, whether it be with the tax rolls or whatever, quite frankly, if the majority, well, it doesn't have to be the majority, because all we need is one or two taxpayers down there that say, listen, I pay taxes, I want that road open, well, then the road's gonna be, then we, as a council, I believe, we've gotta open the road to the best of our ability. But I would still like to have, if indeed there are a number of landowners, property owners, all along that road, whether from starting at Roland Road all the way to Luffman Drive, if we could get a sense, I can imagine that other than fuel trucks and garbage trucks that are, the garbage truck, they have to take their garbage to a localized center is what they do now, because the garbage truck cannot come around that number 2 to those last locations. So they have to carry their garbage, transport it to a localized site farther up the road. So I don't know if those people like to balance the two between garbage pickup having been a heck of an inconvenience, the fact that they no longer have motorcycles or trucks and everything else. It's now a very secluded road. Maybe they like it that way. Myself, if it came back that that the majority, not the majority, it can't be the majority, that no one wanted that road open, I could live with that and say, well, okay, let's turn it into a bike path. But if there's one or two taxpayers, and I'm sure there are down there that want to see that road open, then I think we as a council have got to follow through on that decision. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Councilor Wynn.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director, Is there sufficient time at this point to do an RFP, RFP for the work to be completed and get it done by August 31st?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we decide to move ahead with this project, the design is currently being completed. The timelines, I would have to have a tender out on the street next week with a 2-week closing period, so that we could have a contractor on board and complete the in-water works prior to August 31st. Once you get into the site, prepare the site, and start building your way up and you're out of the water, then by all, I guess you're out of the water. So I think it is doable. It's a very aggressive schedule at this point in time, I will be honest. Very aggressive schedule. There also has been projects I've worked on in the past. Usually, it's not often that you have an in-water working restriction where you have such a tight window. And usually it's between March 31st and July 1st where you cannot be in the water. And that's for fish spawning purposes and that sort. So usually after July 1st, you're good to go. In this case, because of the cold water stream and the sensitivity of the creek, there is an end date. I've also had success in the past of projects where I've had the end date and I've been able to push that and extend that till September 15th, which we're in consultation with right now with the Department of Fisheries and our consultant to see if that window can be pushed to September 15th, which will obviously give us some more time, but it's only an additional 2 weeks.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, so for us to go to all the residents in the area and do a survey, that's gonna cut in time and.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, the survey is not the answer here, in my opinion. This is a municipal road, and if we are going to consider permanently closing a roadway, even though it's been closed for the better part of 2 years now with respect to the failures that have happened, if we're going to permanently close a road, we will have to engage the public and all stakeholders through the municipal class environmental assessment process, which will involve public meetings. It will involve retaining a consultant to carry out that study for us. We will look at all the possible alternatives that could be on the table with respect to whether it's open, whether it's a bike path, whether it's what type of restoration we do there. And that gives the opportunity for all the public, not only the residents on that road, but it may give somebody down in Effingham an opportunity that maybe they use that way to get to the other side of town. So it's a public agent process where it brings everybody in to play, including all the approval agencies, and that's the process that I would recommend going through for this. And that will take a better part of 6 months to 3 quarters.
So we wouldn't get it done this year?
If we do decide to go that way, for sure, that will delay the project.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
To the Director of Public Works. Here's the problems I perceive. Number one, the design isn't complete. Then you have to go with the RFQ. You've got one option, one engineer, and you've got a tight schedule of August the 31st. And you don't know what the weather and all that's gonna be. To me, what that means, the potential for overruns, high cost, extra work are just too great. On the other hand, I have Trout saying what they have there, they think will survive. My vote would be to wait till next year to make sure we got all our ducks in order, which includes a survey from him, a licensed professional Ontario engineer be involved, and possibly even consider a design-build consideration. I think and I personally like Trout's solution to the problem. I think they're the ones that have a lot of experience and done a lot of work. So that's my comment and my recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Corr.
Yes, to you, to the Director. By delaying, how much is this gonna cost us every time we delay? And we're talking 2-3 years. Like, if we would have fixed this on a timely fashion, would it cost us this much? Or we just delayed it and just adding hundreds of thousands of dollars each year?
through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, delaying the project in essence won't cost anything additional, other than the fact that every year there is inflation in construction materials and costs usually do go up marginally. In this point, there has been further deterioration of the site. Site 1 is lost completely, so there's a full reconstruction of that site regardless of what you do. At Site 2, the engineer had only looked at doing failed portions. So as part of this budget now, we're looking at completing the full length of the gabing wall. So delaying the project by a year will not add additional costs to the project, as far as I'm concerned. One thing I would like to say also through the mayor to the councillor, to some of the remarks, we do have a very qualified engineer. They are certified, they are a professional engineer. They deal with fluvial morphology, these types of projects. I think that the solutions that they've come up with, and Trout Unlimited has looked at them and supported their concepts and how to restore it. So moving ahead with another engineer to review this would add, definitely that would add additional cost to this project. So I just wanted to make that comment as well.
If we, and I imagine we will, continue, go forward eventually with the road, we will be able to put road restrictions on that. I can't remember if there were restrictions on that road before, weight-wise, whatever. There must be, we should be able to put restrictions on that, I would think. I've been other places where no trucks allowed. I mean, I realize you have to have garbage trucks going down there, and I'm not too sure one person down there now, right at the end, isn't on stove oil. And so that truck goes to his house, and then I believe he has to do a heck of a backup job. I could be wrong on that, but I thought someone down there was, so here you got a truck full of diesel fuel backing up however far. But if we do go the road option, that surely we can put some restrictions on the traffic down there weight-wise. Because I know that Gambian baskets where they washed out, I'm not saying it was the road, it was probably the erosion of the water, but once we do get it fixed, I'm hoping we can put some kind of weight restriction on down there.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, staff can bring forward a bylaw to put a load restriction on that road, and then it's all about enforcement.
Yes, Councillor Stewart?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, one of the residents who contacted me today about the road said that there had been load restrictions on the road.
Ah, okay, excellent, good. Yes, Councillor Trophy.
Yeah, looking at this, and it just came up throughout this whole weekend where Trout Unlimited reached out, and as you would know, and several residents along there. And everybody that's reached out is saying that they would wish that the road remains closed right now. But like you said, there are a few homes in there. I think we really need to consult with these people, whatever it's going to take.
Yep.
Just to get this project right. If we rush into it, going into the August 31st deadline, I don't know. Like I want to make sure we cross all the T's and dot all the I's in this project first, especially when we're going over budget by about 150,000. So that'd be my comments on that.
And then when I look at Poth Street, we've had a resident here all the time wanting that road open, and God bless them, it's finally going to happen. Whereas I must say, when we closed that road, when I was still on council, and ever since I got to be mayor, and I don't know if the council is the same, I have yet had one person come up to my office or phone me or whatever and say, darn it, we want that road open tomorrow. So yes, I can believe that they must be down there going, well, weighing each option. Well, shoot, it's sort of nice to have not have the motorcycles and heavy trucks down. I don't think there was heavy trucks, but at the same time, it would be nice to be able to travel from one end to the next. So I'm a big believer in public meetings, and I think we definitely need one here. Make sure everybody knows about it and tell us what you want us to do. Myself, that's how I would look at it.
Yeah, we are going over budget, so we have to get it right.
Yes, yes. It's been 3 years now, and like I say, I haven't had anybody knocking on my door demanding that be open, so Let's take our time and let's see what the people want down there. That's what I suggest anyway. Go ahead.
I don't know if I want to take my time. I
Yeah,
want to get it
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But at some point, I want to commit to it.
Yeah.
Either way, early next year, the plan's in place so we can get on it.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
want to
exactly.
wait till year 3 or 4.
Oh, no, but like you say, if we miss August 31st, we got lots of time, so. Yep, yes,
So through you, Mr. Mayor, if it's council's wish, then staff could refer back to council with steps moving forward. I've heard discussed public meeting. I do recommend that staff will bring forward, if it's decided that not to move forward with the restoration of Site 1 tonight, then staff would bring forward a report with next steps to enter into a municipal class environmental assessment study process, probably Schedule B project, which would be a public engagement process, a formalized public engagement process that we would go through to determine what the best possible solution is, and that is your process that's vetted through the Municipal Engineers Association, and is a basically a standard that's used throughout the industry to deal with projects like such as this, where you're taking a roadway and permanently closing it down. I have also had conversations with our manager of Public Works. The roadway, although it is in fairly poor condition, it is open to traffic. We are monitoring daily with our road patrols, or weekly. So we could keep on monitoring in the event that there is a catastrophic failure of that roadway. Then, and I've done this before, I've retained the services of a contractor and gone in and done whatever I needed to do to open that roadway back up. So that's something that we would do and monitor. And in the case that there's an emergency that comes up, then we would obviously enter into an agreement with somebody to go in and open that roadway for us in a temporary condition until we could get a plan in place.
yeah, thank you. Any other discussion on this motion?
No, I guess sorry, so through you, Mr. Mayor, so then if we vote no, then we'll just go with Plan B, as the Director of Public Works just said.
Oh, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, rather than vote no, it would be preferred to amend the motion and replace it with a staff direction to refer this back to staff, directing for a report.
Okay.
Because once you vote no, the matter is closing.
Yes, oh, okay. So you will put that motion forward?
Yes, I will, for amendment.
And seconder, Council Corey?
So you can call the question on the
Okay,
referral.
so on the amendment, put forward by Councilor Trophy, seconded by Councilor Kerr, all those in favor? All those opposed? Amendment passes,
It's referred back to staff.
so it's referred back to staff. Excellent.
Sorry, Jason.
So,
Thank you.
Wait. I'm sorry?
You're at your new curfew hour, so you notice.
Okay. So, council, we are at the new curfew hour of 9 o'clock. So we have to extend it. So a motion put forward by Councilor Wink, seconded by Councilor Stewart, that the rules of procedure as contained in the Town of Pelham procedural bylaw be suspended, and that the specified meeting curfew time of 9 p.m. be and is hereby waived, and that the remainder of the business listed on the agenda for this meeting continue to be considered until A, all matters have been concluded, or until a set time of 10 p.m., whichever occurs first. What is the wish of council? Councilor Hahn?
Mr. Mayor, bearing in mind we still have a second half of our closed session
Yeah.
to tackle.
Yes, although I have discussed this before, earlier on today with the CAO, if we went too long, we could always call a special meeting sometime this week to discuss the other issue, but that's only if we went too long. But whatever. Councilor Trophy?
yeah, there's still like over half a meeting left to go here. Like, we got another 3 hours at least.
This is all the yellow forms to do, yes.
Yeah, like this is not gonna happen in half an hour or an hour. There's a
I know some councilors were here until 3:30, and I think it's, and if we, I don't want to make decisions just to get past and rush decisions. I think we should end it, and then we'll take another day to look at it.
Perhaps we will hear from the CAO.
Can I suggest that this is an excellent time for a biological break, and perhaps the senior staff and I could meet to discuss which items we really, really, really feel you need to discuss tonight, and which could handle adjournment,
Okay.
if that would so please.
Let's have a 10-minute recess then, and then senior staff can have a talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you need to gavel back in.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're back from recess. So, Mr. CAO, do you have any time frame if we defer those other matters?
Excuse me, Your Honor, don't we vote on the,
Well, that's what we're voting on right now, Counselor. We're going to
we
see.
should vote on if we want to stay, yes or no, then all the other decisions fall after that.
Well, let's see,
Okay.
let's see if we can have a time frame if we were to complete some of this agenda that staff has deemed kind of necessary to continue business. So,
If we may, I'd like to suggest you consider deferring items 11.2.10, 11.2.15, and the closed session item to your next full meeting of council being August 12, 2019.
So could we defer 12, 13, 14, and 11? Why do we?
Sorry.
Because most of those, through you, Mr. Mayor, most of those did not come to committee, and now we're asking to make a decision, and the only information we got from 11, 12, and 13 was a presentation. That's all we got. And now you're asking us to make a decision on that, and that's not right.
I believe that's usually all we get is a presentation.
No, it usually goes to the committee as a whole. And it doesn't even get to that point where you could debate something. So you're asking us to make decisions on the future of this community in a 50-minute decision-making. That's not fair. It's not fair to me, it's not fair to the residents.
Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're right now already over curfew.
Yes, so we do have to
So
get.
I would suggest that you consider a motion for extending the curfew and then make a decision on which items, if any, are going to be considered.
Okay. So as a council, everyone, council, do you want to, all matters have been concluded, or do you want to set a time of 10 PM, whichever occurs first? There are a couple of these items that are going to hold things up if they don't get looked at, but whatever. So the choice is all matters have been concluded, or until a set time of 10 PM, whichever occurs first. What's the vote, please? All those in favor of 10 o'clock?
Or not.
No.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, even though the motion itself says all matters are concluded, that would
Yes.
still allow us to extend the curfew, and then there can be a discussion on what items
Ah.
might be deferred.
Okay. So after hearing the clerk's explanation, all matters have been concluded, or so that we can decide where to go
Then you can make a
from
motion
there.
to defer, that's
Yes.
right.
Then make
So
a
you
motion
need this
after that.
motion to extend the meeting even
Yes.
5 minutes, then you can decide
Okay.
what is to be deferred.
So all those in favor of all matters have been concluded, which means then we can defer
Be
if we
deferred.
have to, but we have to do something because we're now, shouldn't be meeting this. So all those, to extend curfew until all matters have been concluded, and then we can discuss what matters we want to conclude. All those in favor, we,
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
yes.
just to give a little bit more explanation, when it says all matters concluded, it would then allow council to make a motion to defer certain reports to the August 12th meeting. That would conclude that matter.
yes.
Right now, we are outside of our procedural bylaw because we haven't extended the curfew.
We're done.
Okay, so, all those in favor of extending the meeting until all matters have been concluded? All those in favor?
Or 10 o'clock.
Or 10 o'clock? You gotta go one way or the other, guys. You're just gonna sit here.
Okay, excuse me, just a second
Wait,
here. I
wait,
think,
please. Okay. Madam Clerk, if everybody doesn't raise their hands, what,
The meeting's over.
The meeting's over.
The meeting would stand in recess and it would have to be reconvened.
That's right.
okay, I guess that's what they want. Meeting's over.